Now we're ready to move on from line to our next element of art, shape. But before we do anything, I'm going to ask you to save, and the shortcut is Command S. I encourage you to learn the shortcuts and the key commands because this will make your life easier. Now, I can do one of two things. I can go and double click on the artboard shape right here to move along, but you can also be using your spacebar to move yourself. And I know that the shape artboard is right next to it, so I could also do it that way. So I am now on my shape artboard, and I want you, next step is to create a new layer and call this one shape. So now I'm ready to get started. I'm thinking about shapes. Shapes are about contours of flat objects, connecting objects, intersecting. They're flat and defined by their length and width. They are two-dimensional. They can be geometric or organic. We can think about how the outline or the stroke affects the shape. So there's lots of things to think about. And we want to start using our shape tools here. So we click out and we can get lots of options. We can pop it out to actually look at them. If we're having issues popping them out, we can also use the Alt modifier tool to actually cycle through them. So here we can use our shapes. And this is not just all we can do, but perhaps the shapes here could be quite helpful. So I'm thinking about how do I create the image of an apple? How can I do that, right? So if I'm making the apple right here, oops, I gotta make sure I want my fill here, and you can also switch it up here as well. And I want my stroke to be black. And here you can also take those ideas that you took with the last one with the line, and you can change the weight, and you can change the mark make. You can change it from rough to smooth to rough. You can change the weight of it. You can change all sorts of things. So the stroke affects the actual shape as well. In this video, I'm going to show you a couple interesting tools that you can use. So we're going to be talking about distorting and transforming objects. And with this one, what we're going to be doing is you're going to be using specific tools that help you actually do this. And these tools are located in our toolbar. So you can see here we got lots of tools, and we're going to slowly start exploring all these different tools. And I encourage you to actually go through and play with them sometimes. So if we have our object, and I'm starting to make my representation of an apple. What's also great about using these shapes is that I can then go in and I can use all those skills that I learned about manipulating shapes with these shapes that were created. So I can think about all the pen tools in terms of adding paths and deleting paths and actually manipulating those paths. So when you're creating objects and manipulating objects, it's not just limited to the ones that you create. You can manipulate any of the ones that are on there. So if this is my apple, I am creating a denotation of an apple using shapes, the elements of art. So first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I am in the selection tool. And this allows me to click and hold shift and select them both, or to drag. And you can see now I have my bounding box and the 4 control points. And I'm going to make this a little smaller, hold down my shift tool to keep it proportional. I'm going to select it again. Maybe I'm going to group it so that this way when I select one, I select everything. And I'm going to hold the Alt tool, and this is my modifier. You can see how my mouse cursor changes. This means I am duplicating that object. All right, so I'm duplicating and I make it a little bigger because I want this one to be the one that you're playing around with and you're manipulating the idea of shapes. So we're going to be using specific tools. We're going to be using different distorting tools and different tools that are amongst the keyboard. So here we have the rotate tool, and this allows us to rotate. Remember that using the bounding box also allows us to rotate. So rotating. You can also see there's other tools in here. If I hold down, we can see we have the reflect tool. So I'm going to show you an example of reflecting something that's a little bit more easier to see if it's reflecting. Say I draw this line, and I select my object, and then I go to my reflect tool. You can see it actually reflects the object. You can also go to Object, Transform, and you have the options here as well to reflect. And here, I find it a little bit easier to control because you can control the angle and whether it's horizontal or vertical. and that's helpful. So then there's a reflective tool. So again, like anything, there's more than one way to do most things in Illustrator. So we just looked at the rotate tool and the reflect tool, which we can actually get to also by here, but you need something actually selected to do anything. So object, transform, rotate, reflect. Now the next thing I'm going to show you is the different tools, transformation tools. All right, so right here you can see width, warp, twirl, pucker, bloat, scallop, crystallize, wrinkle. Now I'm not going to go all over these in great depth, but I'm just going to go through them sort of briefly. So we got the warp tool right here, and if we hold over, we can see a little info about what it is, and really you just want to play around with this. So the warp tool right here, and this allows you to warp objects based on their anchor points. All right, the next one we have this really cool one that's a Twirl Tool. And based on how long you hold down this tool, the more twirls. So less time, less twirls, more time, more twirls. So I just want you to play with this, and you should do this on a duplicated object. We have the pucker tool, which allows you to suck parts of the object inwards. And you can see the little icon actually kind of helps signify it. The next one we're going to talk about is the bloat tool, which does the opposite of that one, which is bloat out our object. So we kind of see if we do so much manipulating, we're going to end up losing the object. We lose the idea, the connotation, the denotation of the apple. But I really want you to play with these tools because they're really fun. We also have the scallop, crystallize, and wrinkle tools, and each one does something different. I'm not going to go over them specifically, but play around. How can you manipulate your shapes to have them still have the denotation of being an apple? So now, does this anymore look like an apple? Not so much. So maybe this was just my playtime. This still looks like an apple. So I want you to play around with your artboard, but then the final one that you're going to be doing is maybe this is my final one, but play around with this one. So play around with using some of the tools we just went over. And that would be all these distortion tools and scale and the reshaping and all these ones over here. So that is your job.